It is a great pleasure to be invited to this Congress for a lecture in your outreach symposium, Evolution More Than Biology. I want to thank the ESEB panel and especially Thomas de Souza, Nico Michels and Daniel Dresmann, which I suspect of being responsible for this honor. For years I enjoyed our cooperation here in Tübingen, although I have been warned repeatedly by some colleagues from my field, the scientific study of religion, Religionswissenschaft. Do not work with these evolutionary biologists. They are clever intruders. Well, I sure hope you are, as we need more interdisciplinary efforts. Because if evolutionary theory is true or viable, it should be able to explain any universal human trait, including religiosity. If religious emotions and behaviors would defy evolutionary studies completely, all of us, those from the natural and social sciences and those from the humanities, should certainly know about it. And the only way to find out is to work together, which happens to be a very fruitful and exciting enterprise. And then, the evolutionary approach to a religion is not particularly new, and it has not even been started by some biologist, but by a theologian most of you might have heard about. His name was Charles Darwin. And he was not even the first one. More than a century before evolutionary theories in a modern sense were formulated, David Hume assumed a natural history of religion in 1757. And after Charles Darwin published his Origin of Species in 1859, a range of hypotheses and theories concerning the evolutionary history of religion appeared. Being a scholar in religion, Darwin drew on Hume and others and included a well-done chapter and a range of definitions and hypotheses concerning the evolution of religiosity and religion in his Descent of Man from 1871. In this lecture, I want to give you a brief overview of Darwin's respective assumptions and their viability from the perspective of contemporary evolutionary studies of religion. Let us start with the working definitions and framework presented by Darwin as a subchapter of its own. Citation: Belief in God, religion. There is no evidence that man was aboriginally endowed with the ennobling belief in the existence of an omnipotent God. On the contrary, there is ample evidence, derived not from hasty travelers, but from men who have long resided with savages, that numerous races have existed and still exist, who have no idea of one or more gods, and who have no words in their languages to express such an idea. End of citation. Darwin's first bold hypothesis on the matter has been that religiosity as well as specific beliefs in a monotheist deity are aspects of evolutionary history. Towards the end of his book, Darwin repeated this point, emphasizing the interacting coevolution of biological and cultural traditions. Citation: The idea of a universal and beneficent creator of the universe does not seem to arise in the mind of man, until he has been elevated by long-continued culture. End of citation. Today, there can be almost no reasonable doubt that Darwin had been right on this. Religiosity and complex religious beliefs did not spring up full-fledged, but evolved over time. We might point out early burials appearing at least about 100,000 years ago among Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis as the first archaeological indicators of religious or proto-religious beliefs. These were followed by figurines and cave art since about 40,000 years, and finally sacred buildings with complex and convening mythologies finally reaching in our historical time and present. Evolutionary studies are conclusively showing that these biocultural births of high gods are driven primarily by demographic and cultural factors re-influencing genetic outcomes. But before proceeding with his empirical and evolutionary hypothesis, Darwin added an important metaphysical caveat. Citation: The question is of course wholly distinct from that higher one, whether there exists a creator and ruler of the universe, and this has been answered in the affirmative by the highest intellects that have ever lived. End of citation. Darwin's metaphysical stand is that of methodological agnosticism, and it has withstood more than a century of heated debate. It is impossible either to verify or falsify the existence of God by the way of evolutionary studies. Atheists might interpret the evolutionary findings as adaptive illusions, whereas theists might rejoice in observing God's ongoing creation and revelation. The evolutionary findings should be discussed in the emerging field of evolutionary epistemology, but I am assured that evolutionary atheisms, evolutionary agnosticisms, and evolutionary theisms will likely proceed to flourish. But then, what about a testable and workable evolutionary definition of religiosity? Did the great scholar ever anything in this regard? Indeed, he did. Citation: If, however, we include under the term religion the belief in unseen or spiritual agencies, the case is wholly different, for this belief seems to be almost universal with the less civilized races. Nor is it difficult to comprehend how it arose. End of citation. After numerous versions and trials, recent working definitions on the trait have increasingly returned to Darwin's belief in unseen or spiritual agencies. Religiosity is increasingly defined as beliefs in and behavior towards supernatural, or more precisely, super-empirical agents, including ancestors, ghosts and spirits, bodhisattvas, tirthankaras, demons, jinns, angels, gods, space aliens, and God. And as assumed by Darwin, dozens of modern twin studies confirmed conclusively that religiosity turns out to have a genetic and therefore hereditary basis. As Thomas Bouchard put it at the Biology of Religion conference in Delmenhorst, the findings measuring the heritability of religiousness are remarkably similar to those concerning musicology or intelligence. Therefore, Darwin was right to set religion in the same category as speech or music. It is an emergent system of gene-culture coevolution, a biocultural trait. Although Darwin did not yet have knowledge about genes, he already excelled in religious studies and in careful observations comparing animal and human behaviors. Therefore, he was able to decipher a range of cognitive modules that have resurfaced as promising candidates in our modern studies. Darwin thought about animism as the primary form of religious beliefs. Citation: I cannot but suspect that there is a still earlier and ruder stage, when anything which manifests power or movement is thought to be endowed with some form of life, and with mental faculties analogous to our own. End of citation. And Darwin observed corresponding tendencies by observing his beloved dog. Citation: My dog, a full-grown and very sensible animal, was lying on the lawn during a hot and still day. But at a little distance a slight breeze occasionally moved an open parasol, which would have been wholly disregarded by the dog had anyone stood near it. As it was, every time that the parasol slightly moved, the dog growled fiercely and barked. He must, I think, have reasoned to himself in a rapid and unconscious manner that movement without any apparent cause indicated the presence of some strange living agent, and no stranger had a right to be on his territory. End of citation. In the meantime, these tendencies have been studied and prescribed among animals and humans extensively as hyperagency detection. Coming together with another cognitive module called theory of mind, beliefs in super-empirical agents may have emerged. As Darwin put it, citation, the belief in spiritual agencies would easily pass into the belief in the existence of one or more gods. For savages would naturally attribute to spirits the same passions, the same love of vengeance, or simplest form of justice, and the same affections which they themselves experienced. End of citation. Darwin also probed into the field of religious experiences. He was especially interested in devotion, which he explored not only in his Descent of Man, but also in his expression of the emotions in man and animals from 1872. Citation. The feeling of religious devotion is a highly complex one, consisting of love, complete submission to an exalted and mysterious superior, a strong sense of dependence, fear, reverence, gratitude, hope for the future, and perhaps other elements.